Hello everyone, my name is Nadira Campbell. This presentation centers on performance assessment development and was prepared to fulfill the requirements for EDU 607 at Post University. This will be an overview of a previous performance assessment development project I completed on deconstructing standards and assessing learning targets. I will highlight a deconstructed literacy performance standard for a preschool classroom that features a learning activity that can be used to measure the student's performance skills, reasoning skills, and understanding of knowledge with an example of a student rubric and an assessment critique. Through the performance task of retelling stories and recounting details from informational texts, the children will demonstrate the desired understanding, knowledge, and skills of early language communication and literacy learning progressions. Deconstructing standards is key to developing an effective performance task. Moss and Brocard state that learning targets described in a language that students understand the lesson-sized chunk of information skills and reasoning processes that students will come to know deeply. Part of successfully assessing and managing learning is to deconstruct these standards. The next few slides will show an example of a graphic organizer that helps to identify the knowledge reasoning scale and product learning targets. The graphic organizers used in this presentation of deconstructing standards, tables and graph tools both use the Teaching Strategies Gold Standard RLK2 with prompting and support, retell familiar stories including key details. After deconstructing standards, target statements are converted into student-friendly I can statements. Examples of knowledge or understanding required to become competent in this standard would be concepts including that children should be able to comprehend and respond to books and other texts. Children should be able to retell stories and recount details from informational texts. Children should be able to retell a familiar story and recount an informational text in proper sequence, including significant events and characters as appropriate. Examples of I can student-friendly statements would include things such as I can answer questions about the book and other texts, and I can retell the stories in detail and in the correct sequence. Examples of reasoning requirements in the same literacy category would be children should be able to answer higher order questions to promote their ability to predict what happens next in a story. The I can student-friendly reflection would include languages like I can answer questions about stories and predict what happens next. Performance skills required in this deconstructed standard would be that children should be able to retell a story in many forms. That is, arrange sequence picture cards to retell a story, perhaps role play the story. While the I can student-friendly statement would be I can use sequence boards and picture cards to tell a story, and I can retell stories by drawing and dictating the correct sequence of the story. A knowledge of your target audience is another essential component of a performance task, and developing these tasks includes measuring what children are learning so that they may assess and apply them to the real world. For the product performance section of the GRASS model, the purpose of this task was for the child to retell familiar stories and recount details from a nonfiction text using pictures or props as prompts. These fundamental early language and literacy skills are the foundations and building blocks for all future communication methods and ideas. In young preschool children, this specific performance task extends into other learning standards. Creating student rubrics helps to ensure that all parts of the classroom activity and performance task are addressed and the goals and outcomes are outlined for each child. Rubrics are helpful in evaluating specific tasks and they contain criteria and descriptions that reflect specific features of the desired performance. A student rubric evaluates the students in the categories of sequencing events in a story, critical thinking, and application of knowledge. This project met all 5 keys in the quality assessment tool. Key 1, the purpose of the assessment tool is for teachers to measure students' skills in sequencing, critical thinking, and application of knowledge at a developmentally appropriate level. The formative assessment will be recorded during the learning process and help teachers and students adjust their real-time strategies. It will also help identify areas for improvement. Key 2, the achievement targets are evident in the difference in mastery level in the rubric. Brocard suggests that the criteria chosen should be definable and observable. The learning targets will guide teachers on what to teach and students on what to learn. The targets will be posted around the learning environment and communicated to the students during the learning process. Key 3, the method selected makes sense given the goals and purpose of the activities. The different mastery levels provide data that reflects students' understanding or mastery. The performance task design best suits this assessment because of the developmental state of the students. Key 4, the assessment tool provides evidence of student learning. The evidence gathered will help the teacher determine how to approach reteaching a concept if required. Formative assessments primarily offer feedback to students and teachers on learning progress. Key 5, students are made aware of their objectives through I statements. For example, I can tell the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Sequence cards and props associated with the story will be posted in a designated classroom area accessible to students to enable navigation of the task independently and evaluate their progress accurately, and teachers will provide feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this presentation and to learn more about managing performance assessments in a learner-centered environment.